Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I am now back doing a live podcast on British politics. I've got some videos here. On the British politics, and I'm going to be playing them through, and then we're going to be talking about them. I'll be talking about them and saying what I think. Okay. Let's go over.
When Parliament gets back next week, it is going to be Brexit, 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 Brexit. And it's going to be like that until there is or isn't a deal. And even when there is a deal, it will still be Brexit, because then comes the trade deal, hopefully. Now, she has got an almost irreconcilable party to deal with, but she's not alone in that, because she looks across to Jeremy Corbyn, and so has he. I'm not sure the Liberal Democrats are completely irreconcilable at the moment, but...
Hey, ladies and
gents. Singing from the same hymn sheet.
So, good day or not, Layla? You
I think she's done really. Yeah, for having a go.
You can imagine Nelson Mandela doing that kind of little dance, can't you? So I think that was okay.
Are you saying Theresa May is the new Nelson Mandela?
I didn't say it. You said that later.
So quite a good day, but. Well, I think there was a but coming, or am I?
Well, there is a but coming, because we all know that when she gets back, when Parliament gets back next week, it is going to be Brexit, 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 Brexit. And it's going to be like that until there is or isn't a deal. And even when there is a deal, it will still be Brexit, because then comes the trade deal, hopefully. Now, she has got an almost irreconcilable party to deal with, but she's not alone in that, because she looks across to Jeremy Corbyn, and so has he. I'm not sure the Liberal Democrats are completely irreconcilable at the moment, but who knows?
They're all singing from the same hymn sheet.
So, good day or not, Layla? You
I think she's done really well today, actually. So, on the one hand, you've got people like me who are, totally pro-international aid, and we want 0.7% GNI enshrined, and she, I think, has made a good defence of that today, and particularly in the case of women and girls and education and that kind of thing. On the other hand, the right wing are interpreting this as, British money for British companies. So, I think she's probably done quite well there today.
Okay, so we're sort of giving her points for trying and dancing. None of us want to be in that position. She can't get a deal, though, can she? I mean, and one that just sell to her party. Checkers, is it just what is going to happen?
This is the thing. You see Theresa May there quite valiantly trying to say that, look, despite the fact that everyone has ruled out my deal, including Brussels, Macron recently, and half of my party, perhaps even more than half, we're going to keep pressing on.
Hello, ladies and gents.
Okay, but
this
is
for politics.
But I also think it's hard
British
to see
politics.
for any type of Brexit.
Please feel free to comment your views on the British politics.
The problem is that over the summer, Number 10 hoped this would calm things down, and actually the party just got more divided, more angry, and actually the sides are feuding as much as they were before.
Stephen, do you think she can get through this autumn, a party conference as well, and somehow just with her sort of patient and weary kind of repetition of the same formula, sell it to the party and beyond?
Well, I'm not going to sell it to the party, but I do think the fact that it's such an impossible and horrible job for whoever the Conservative leader is means that, if you're someone who'd like to be Prime Minister, do you really think, actually, I fancy trying to persuade 7 irreconcilable pro-Leave MPs or 7 irreconcilable pro-Remain MPs? I think Katie's exactly right to say it's impossible to work out what Brexit outcome the Conservative Party can agree on, which means that I can't see why anyone will decide on getting rid of her fixes their problem.
Okay, so that's what's going to take us to the leadership. And the first threats to Theresa May, a leadership challenge over the autumn. Are you expecting one, Ian? Or are you expecting her to stand up, as some had suggested, at the party conference and announce a timed departure a year ahead or so?
Well, this party conference can't go any worse for her than last year's did. So she starts from a good position there. I think that she's probably got a poster on her bedroom wall which just has the letters KBO with a picture of Churchill, keep buggering on, because that's what she does, and she does it very successfully. I think every time I come on these we say this, but she's incredibly resilient. She bounces back when most of us think, well, how can she possibly do that? Now, I don't think there will be a leadership challenge this autumn, because I think anybody that launched one would have to be clinically insane. But then there is Boris Johnson that we have to consider here. And if he launched something, say at the party conference or before the European summit, he would get his just desserts. I don't think he's got the support on the Tory benches to launch anything meaningful at the moment. Now that might change after a little while, but I don't anticipate that this side of the press.
Stephen, do you think Boris has had a bad summer or a good summer, weak, strong?
I think he's actually had a bad summer. He's strengthened his appeal among Conservative activists, but that has never been his problem. His problem has always been his colleagues on the Conservative benches are worried about his judgment, worried that he couldn't be Prime Minister. And in a summer that was otherwise awful for the Labour Party, we had a week of Conservative crisis caused solely by him on a quiet news day going, I'm going to compare people to letterboxes.
Yeah.
Okay, so not expecting a chat. Let's move on to the Labour Party. Because I mean, you might have expected this time that they would be threatened, but I think Theresa May comes out well ahead on the Prime Minister front.
Which is extraordinary in of itself. I mean, at this point, we would expect.
And Labour obviously very caught in its own conversation about anti-Semitism. Where does Labour go? How does it get out of it? I know you're a Lib Dem MP.
Well,
give them your advice.
I dare give the Labour Party advice. What I can see is what, I'm speaking to Labour colleagues across the House who are very, very frustrated with the direction that the party is going. I think, particularly on Brexit, and I think this is going to be a make or break conference about Brexit. Whether or not momentum and their movement can then force Jeremy Corbyn to back a more populist agenda and back a people's vote, we shall see. Without it, we won't be able to achieve what we need, which is a further...
These are our two Brexiteers. Katie, you see, the deal waiting to be done is for Corbyn to say, look, Remainers, vote for me and I'll give you a second referendum, or Labour's going to become a party of second referendum. Is that your fear, that what has to happen?
I think ever since Chequers, the chance of no deal and the chance of no Brexit have increased significantly. And you look at the People's Vote campaign, I think it used to be a source of probably some amusement to quite a lot of Brexiteers, perhaps sore losers. I don't think anyone's laughing as much now. They definitely seem to have momentum behind them. And they might have another momentum behind them soon, depending how Labour conference goes. And you can see that they have a clear plan. I think that's what's lacking on the Leave side.
And the clear plan is what?
We'll first have to try and get this motion through at Labour conference to at least open up the leadership to a second referendum, then bring more Labour MPs on side, win a few Tory MPs, and then when the final deal comes back, try and force through a motion at the Speaker's discretion. And I mean, it's
the second broadcast I got here is for British politics, so we can talk about how we think British politics is going and what it should be going like. So this is for people to put their views across, if you know what I mean. British politics. You're out well. You're out. You think you are? You think you're at the fucking? You think you're at Dragon's Den? I'm out. Don't go by, mate. Don't go, please. Put your two pennies in for this about this podcast. Please give us your views on the British politics. Come on, people. British politics time. How it is. Let's go over and play this video, and we talk about it. Shall we?
many reasons it might not work, but given that things are so unpredictable right now, you just can't rule it out anymore.
I think that in some ways Labour conference is a bit of a... the central problem is there are too many Labour MPs who, regardless of the party whip, not least because no one in the Labour Party feels they're going to take lectures from Jeremy Corbyn on rebelling on an issue of principle. There are too many
British politics is bullshit, because let's face it.
Because they're worried that they're leaving.
British politics is bullshit. You're right. It is. But let's put our views, shall we? Jamie. Gordon Ramsay. Okay. You think Gordon Ramsay? I'll have to say Jamie Oliver. Let's put your hang on, people. Right, guys, what do you think the prime ministers, the prime ministers here, British to do? How do you think the prime ministers should actually run this country? what do you think they should have set in place for, say, British-born citizens like us? What do you think to be put in place? Hey?
Hasn't that changed over the summer? Haven't Labour
Because I think
begun to switch to Remain? I mean,
chicken, cod, beef. Chicken, cod, beef. Chicken, cod, beef. We could put like a fried chicken, or a cooked chicken, or a fried fish and a beef joint in power. probably they get the job done properly. Let's face it, the British government is just stupid, right? They're taking away money to the away from the elderly. They're taking the elderly benefits and the elderly, not just the elderly benefits, like what's it called? Pensions away from the elderly. They also tackling the disabled community by taking the benefits and the services that the disabled community so rightly needs to live a much normal-ish life as possible. So I think what they should do is look after their own British-born citizens first, if you know what I mean. Don't you think? Don't you think? Let's look after their own British citizens first. I think we should come out of the EU. I think every country that's in the EU should leave the EU because the EU is not helping one little bit. The EU is just a waste of time and a waste of money, right? In fact, having been in the EU, that means you've got open borders. That means that it leaves people to go from one European country to another European country to another European country without showing their paperwork, like their documents. They can just go across the border without showing documents, for any form of ID. Right, so I think it'd be better off. We'd be better off. I think every country is in the EU to be better off to come out of the EU, right, and become their own independent country yet again. You know what I mean? That's what I think, right? And I think that the British government took after and support their disabled community a lot more than they do. In fact, they don't look after the disabled community. They take money from the disabled community that the disabled community actually needs to lead a normal-ish life as they possibly can. They're taking money away from the elderly as well. They're taking away money from the single parents that at the moment can't work because they've got kids at home. Depends on their single parent. So I think single parents, then while they've got small children at home, they need to be able to stay at home and be there for their child, right? I think disabled community who can't work but needs that money, right, should get that money. I think the elderly who's done their time in work and working, who, right, needs that money. I think that the armed forces that's fought for our country, that's left the armed forces because of ill health, right? They should not be just pushed aside and say, get on with it. You know, to leave the armed forces, they shouldn't be just pushed aside and say, get on with your life now. Get on with your life. They should be brought in, melting back into the civilian life cycle. Oh, I don't know. Can you hear me? Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me there because can you hear me now? I don't know why, but my microphone stopped working. Hang on. Hang on. Where's my phone? That's my head in that house. Oh, hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me? No? Oh, I don't know why that is. No. I can't hear my voice. I think my voice is now gone. What's that going on there? Hang on. Can you hear me? Mapito. Can you hear me, ladies and gentlemen? Can you hear me, ladies? Hang on. Don't know what's going on here. Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, no, well, no, fine. Yeah, what I think, right, is that we should be allowed to. I'm going to check something because I don't know. I'm not saying my microphone's moving. I don't know if it's actually working. I don't know. I think I might have to restart again, if you know what I mean, my friends. Oh shit. Pardon me. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, you can. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you can hear me. It's just my computer. Right, where was I? I've got one person viewing me. I'm thinking, right, this is about politics, right? I think every European country that's in the EU should actually leave the EU because it's showing not to work. And the reason being, the reason I'm saying the EU is not working, right? The reason I'm saying that is because with the EU, being in the EU, right, we have to, we have open borders. And if we have open borders, every country is in the EU. If we've got open borders, that means that people from any European country who's in the EU, right, go into another EU country without showing really documents. So it's sort of free. It's as easy to walk into that country, do what we want in that country. Doesn't matter what we're doing in that country, right? Just walking in there and then being, oh, you know what I mean? So, yeah, you know what I mean? So, sorry about that. I'm an application on my iPad here, right? That's why I stopped talking for a bit. Yeah. So I think everyone should leave the EU because it's showing not to work. In fact, EU, I've said it once before, I'm saying it again. EU is just a waste of time, a waste of money, right? What's the point of paying into the EU to be a member of something? There's no point at all. There's no point at all being a part of the EU. There's no reasons whatsoever. All right. I think what we should do, come out the EU, everyone, everyone that's in the EU can leave the EU, just walk away from the EU, right? Show them that we don't need the EU to get on with each other, right? Because all of us we can leave the EU, become our own independent country yet again. That's I think that's what we all want, is our own independent country, right? That gives us back the power of our borders, right? And if you want to anyone wants to come to an EU country or to another country, like go to another country, either to work or to live or for a study period of time or just a holiday, then that means they need the proper documents, right, for the reason for their stay, the reason for their visit, right? Because at the moment, being open borders around the EU, the EU countries, right, it's making it easy for people to go into these countries and cause havoc, cause trouble in these EU countries. For instance, someone who's not from a EU country, right, they can go into one EU country, and once they got into that EU country, they're free to go to another EU country and not show the documents, which I think is wrong, right? So I think the EU is not good at all. The EU, in fact, is just a waste of time, waste of money, right? So I think we need to come out of the EU. I think everyone to come out of the EU. EU is not that good at all. You know what I mean? Please, if you're viewing me right now, please give me your comments and your comments of your thoughts in the comment section, and let's discuss the politics. All right, let's discuss the politics. And what I do now, ladies and gents, boys and girls, I'm going to move this microphone right back over here.
Not levers all
And
over
listen
the
to
place,
this.
but the Labour levers. Is there not some evidence?
Well, yeah. So some Labour levers have, right. So if you are, say, Caroline Flynn in Don Valley, you actually still have a lot of Leave voting Labour supporters who have not moved towards Remain, who are quite angry, who are worried about checkers. And while those MPs still exist, you would need 25 Conservative rebels, even if Labour were to change its position, which is quite a big if.
Underestimate that, because I think actually there's more than that who are maybe thinking about it.
Tory rebels who
I think would join with the right. If no deal becomes more and more possible, I think it's more than 25. I would also say, if you look at the poll yesterday, North East, 16 points now in favour of Remain. It's now 50-50 split in the North East of this country. There is movement in this direction, and I think it's because people are scared about no deal.
There actually isn't movement in that direction. If anything, it's in the opposite direction. There was a poll in the Mail on Sunday a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, but this was yesterday's poll.
I mean, in one area, maybe. If I was Brandon Lewis, the Conservative Party chairman, I would think all my Christmases had come at once if Jeremy Corbyn went to have it's not a people's vote. We've had one of those. It's the second referendum.
Another people's vote.
Well, you didn't like the first one. So what would happen then is the Tories would start selecting candidates in all of these northern margins.
Yes, hot chocolate tonight, dude.
And they would drive that message home for however long it is between now and the next election. And I would say that would be worth 3, 4, 5 percentage points in the poll to the Tories if that happened.
Look, let's just talk about potential centre force, something else coming out. Before we do, we need to talk about the Lib Dems.
Yeah.
So Layla, obviously the idea has been spilt out in the last few days that maybe the Lib Dems will change their constitution, have a leader from outside Parliament.
Yeah.
Is that a good idea?
I think it's a really interesting idea. And one of the things I think that is a story from Brexit is that people are generally annoyed with politics, annoyed with politicians. What we're trying to do here is reach out to a wider audience and create a bit of a movement around Brexit, but also other things, you know.
And has Vince Cable told you what his plans are?
To a degree. So
you know what his intention is?
I know some of them. The point
And
that we need to
share
make,
them with us.
though, well, some of them are about opening up the membership more widely, so allowing people to become more supporters. The idea is to be a movement and not just be you need to pay a subscription and only then do you get to, stand or vote for leader or whatever. But the point is we don't just decree these things in the Lib Dems. It doesn't work that way. It's all democratically done through conference. So that's what needs to happen first.
Stephen, you've been looking at the sort of centre centre party moves and all of that shenanigans. Is that going to happen in the next six months?
I don't think it will happen in the next 6 months, because a lot of the key people on the Labour side believe that while they are within the Labour Party, they might be able to soften or stop Brexit, and they are reluctant to close the door on that. But when Brexit is resolved one way or the other, I think that will be when we start to see an organised breakaway of people who are disaffected within the Labour Party.
How many, Stephen? I want Stephen's.
I think it will be no more than 10, maybe even as few as 2.
I want to finish. Sorry, we've only got only 30 seconds. And Katie, help me out on this. Next 6 months, is it possible we will muddle through and it'll all be fairly normal politics, or does it have to be that something absolutely mega is about to confront us?
I think Theresa May most likely clings on, but there'll be moments when it seems like she shouldn't cling on, or perhaps we should go to the country. But we have the Fixed Term Parliament Act, and I think the majority of Tories don't actually want her to go to after Brexit is done so much. And so I think it's going to be turbulent, but I still think that the things that we see in terms of leaders is going to stay broadly the same.
Okay, in a word each, turbulence or muddle through? Stephen?
Turbulence.
Turbulence.
Both.
So looking at that, ladies and gents, boys and girls, so far.
Intrigue, backstabbing and secret plots. The Brexit vote was unlike anything in UK political history. People are still asking, how did they all get it so wrong?
On the night of the result, the mood was pretty buoyant.
Could the PM have got a better deal from the EU? Why was the Remain campaign such a disaster? And what was it like to be in the room when Britain's role in the world changed forever? We've talked to senior politicians, campaign chiefs and PR gurus to piece together the inside story of how Brexit unfolded and to look to the future. This is how Britain lost the European plot.
We are approaching one of the biggest decisions this country will face in our lifetimes, whether to remain in a reformed European Union or to leave.
Back to first principles. Did David Cameron have to put Britain's EU future on the line?
I'm afraid it'll go down as one of the worst self-inflicted harm that a Prime Minister could do ever in probably British political history. And there was absolutely no need for it whatsoever. And having pulled it, he unleashed forces that he had no control over and left us where we are today.
I think he made the mistake of thinking that it was in the bag and therefore not really communicating to the other EU leaders that there was any possibility of a leave vote.
He was going to countries that no British Prime Minister had been to for a century. And what he was constantly saying was a warning to them, look, there is a lot of concern and Euroscepticism in Britain, and we really could leave the EU.
From the pro-European point of view, George Osborne said that he was the absolutely last person to be persuaded that it was desirable or necessary, and Michael Gove, from the anti-European point of view, apparently told Cameron, for goodness sake, don't do this. You'll split the party, you'll split the country, it will have completely unpredictable consequences. Don't take the risk.
It became clear to me in 2012 there would be a referendum. And of course, that point when I think it was 81 Conservative MPs rebelled to try and force a referendum. So it was clear from that point there would be one. So we had to start preparing.
The Brexiters began plotting their campaign in plain sight at the Tate Britain Gallery, just half a mile from Westminster.
I took the view that if we met, sometimes we'd meet in the cafe here, sometimes we'd just go around and look at the paintings. Yes, we never met a single hack or a single MP.
Despite the plotting, the PM was confident he could win.
David Cameron embarked on a European odyssey, intended to secure a better deal for Britain in the EU, a deal he could sell in a referendum. It turned out to be an ill-fated mission.
Anything that was going to be acceptable to the British people or convincing to the electorate was not acceptable to EU partners. And I think that that is still the case. I think those who say you could have got more, you could have got an emergency break or a cap on immigration, I just don't think that was realistic.
I'm convinced that the day that the Leave vote won was when the Prime Minister came back without any powers returned, without even a new treaty. And we were obviously then saying, well, look, if this is how we're treated now, before we've had the vote, how would we be treated if we voted to stay?
There's a sort of industry in saying that he didn't actually get a very good deal when he went and did the renegotiation. He actually got us out of ever closer union. But what I think that our mistake probably was that we created a situation where people had greater expectation than was realistic.
Here in Brussels, there was a general feeling that David Cameron had got a good deal, perhaps too generous a deal, and people thought he was going to win his referendum.
In Brussels, we're convinced that the deal that the UK has in the EU, with a budget rebate, with no Schengen, no Euro, justice and police cooperation, and so on and so forth, it was impossible to get a better deal outside of the EU.
He said that he would win the referendum.
He was confident.
He was pretty confident, yes.
Diplomats tell me that at a G20 summit in Brisbane in 2014, David Cameron claimed he would win the referendum by a margin of 70-30. Did that confidence undermine his negotiating position? Could he have got a better deal?
It was regarded as too generous because I remember reading the newspapers and they said you gave everything to the British, and so they always have some advantages in the EU.
Cameron went and asked for hardly anything and got nothing. And at that moment, I said, given that I'm asked to cast my vote, I cannot be silent and I cannot endorse it.
He asked for too little, and then in the end, relied on Mrs. Merkel delivering more than she could ever do. She's not going to sacrifice European unity in order to help David Cameron out of an internal domestic political jam in Britain and in his own party.
To come back and pretend that we'd somehow renegotiated our complete, terms with the EU, I'm afraid just didn't stack up.
Britain's EU renegotiation was settled in February 2016, and the fight was on as the country prepared for its referendum in June. Cameron's policy chief, Oliver Letwin, was tasked with a sovereignty bill that might persuade Boris Johnson to campaign for Remain.
The discussion with Boris was a very lively discussion. It went on for some weeks, and it was a very interesting discussion. It turned out in the end it wasn't very useful because we never got to the point of an agreement that we could then have tried out.
One of the big unknowns really is what would have happened, particularly with Boris. I mean, I think Michael Gove was both less important and probably more predictable, but I think Boris was a big unknown going into the campaign. Pretty extraordinary in retrospect that right up until those last few days that was in doubt.
He had lost Boris, but Cameron still thought he could destroy the Leave side with a barrage of warnings about the economic risks of Brexit. Quickly, the campaign got bogged down.
The great uncertainty that leaving the European Union would bring.
As the Prime Minister's and the Chancellor's interventions, which were sort of relentlessly sort of dire in their prognostication, were not really being accepted. They weren't being embraced by people. There was a growing resistance of the public. They weren't going to be bulldozed in this way. They weren't going to be carpet bombed into voting to keep Britain inside the European Union.
The turning point came on May the 27th and the introduction of PERDA. The government machine was no longer allowed to work for the Remain side, and the Leave campaign unleashed its most powerful weapon, immigration.
The advantage of our proposal is that you will be able to set the right priorities for immigration when you take back control.
There were one or two people on our side who were rather complacent and said at the time, we've so won this economic argument, we've forced them to go on to the immigration argument. There were those of us who felt actually it was always their game plan was to go on immigration. Then there were ministers who were told, and in no uncertain terms, not to go out and speak about it. There were appearances that were cancelled by Number 10, and I think all of this was deeply unfortunate.
David Cameron decided he could not risk taking on his opponents on the most salient issue in the campaign.
David Cameron could have brought that entire debate to a complete halt by saying, I will veto the application by Turkey to become a member of the European Union. what he did is he kept saying, well, of course, the French will veto it, which simply just added to our argument of saying, even to something as fundamental as Turkish application, the British Prime Minister is outsourcing that responsibility to France.
Then came the decision by Cameron not to personally target Boris Johnson.
And we've got right on our side.
For some, it was the biggest blunder in the Brexit story.
And let's make sure that June the 24th is Independence Day for Britain. Thank you very much for coming on.
I was surprised they didn't go after Michael Gove and Boris Johnson. So had the Remain campaign tried to sort of lash us all in together and basically say that Michael, Boris, Geezer, Andy Bamford, as bad as Nigel Farage and his friends in the UK, that would have been terminal to us.
Hello there. How are you? Nice to see you. Thank you very much. That's incredibly generous of you.
We were reluctant to sanction the blue-on-blue tax for two reasons. The small one is that David Cameron wanted to bring the Conservative Party back together at the end of this, and that the more poison that was pumped into the system, that was obviously going to be a problem. But the real reason was that the more that you were dealing in a tax, you were basically feeding a beast, which meant that there would be endless media stories about who was having a go at who was going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party and therefore Prime Minister. And that meant that you were dragging the campaign off into other territory that is not actually about what you want to talk about, why it's sensible for Britain to stay in the EU.
In desperation, Cameron and Osborne ramped up warnings of a Brexit calamity, including what Leave memorably dubbed a punishment budget. It backfired.
The Remain campaign never quite managed to establish that total dominance on economic issues that every time an argument was made, the Leave campaign were very effective at either undermining the messenger or just sowing enough doubt in people's minds. Some of the messaging, particularly towards the end, was very black and white and less credible for that.
For me, it was odd because I'm apparently one of the inventors of message discipline and keeping absolutely tight on the strategy or a very sort of tight-knit communications. But I never dreamed of taking it to the extent, literally, of saying absolutely nothing else about anything and simply just saying the same thing over and over and over again, especially when it manifestly wasn't working.
One of the questions that Peter Mandelson really struggles with is that actually getting an influence on the Labour Party to stick to the message and stay with that message was a real problem too. So if you are a leader of the left in this country, Jeremy Corbyn or Nicola Sturgeon, and you probably think that Remain will win, there's very little in it for you to be hugely supportive of the Conservative Prime Minister, who in normal day-to-day business is actually a mortal enemy.
The murder of the Labour MP Joe Cox by a man shouting Britain first put the campaign on hold, but it did not change the course of history.
It was the toxic combination of Joe Cox's murder with UKIP's appalling Breaking Point poster. And that combination, I thought, really taken the wind out of our sails. And there was a point that day where I really thought it was game over. There's no way we get our momentum back. And we start having that inevitable swing back to the status quo.
It wasn't just morally
I'll be back in a minute, ladies and gents, boys and girls. Back in a minute, okay?
It was obviously tactically disastrous for us. I'm not sure Matthew Elliott is right in thinking that vote Leave were the people who actually won it. I think Farage actually had a much greater impact than they're prepared to accept or admit.
The poster, as I said, I think personally I wouldn't have run it if I'd have been in charge of the campaign. But nevertheless, it was relevant to what was going on, and it wasn't appalling at all. It reflected what's happening to this country. We got this fantastic victory despite Vote Leave, not because of it. It's all down to UKIP and its activists.
In the end, all Cameron and the Remain campaign could do was wait.
On the night of the result, I had a dinner for donors, and in which George Osborne came, and the mood was pretty buoyant. We just had all the opinion polls which showed us with a clear lead, a narrow lead, but a very clear, consistent lead. George Osborne was nervous, but sort of quietly confident. And as the night went on, you kept hoping that the cities were going to sort of come to one's rescue. And they never did quite enough. And by really 3 a.m, it was absolutely clear we'd lost. And by that time, the mood was bleak. Personally, I felt really desperately sad, and it was a sort of sense of almost disbelief that we were doing this. And of course, it was also mixed by the fact there were a lot of young people who were really distraught, and many in tears, and so it was a grim evening to finally go to bed.
I argued that David should stay. We had time quietly to talk about what if, and we talked about both possibilities, obviously, as nobody was sure whether we were going to win or lose. And I strongly argued that David should remain.
Why was that?
Well, rather simple grounds, actually. I thought he was the person who's best able to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. His view was, and other people in the room were very persuasive about this, that actually he would not be the best person to lead it at that point because his credibility was too damaged at that moment by having been on the other side.
My view very strongly was that if we lost, he was going to have to resign. And the reality was, I just didn't think it would be sustainable.
Hello, I've got 3 people watching me.
And it was also the right thing to do. He didn't believe in Brexit. It would have looked a very strange situation if somebody who campaigned as hard as...
Please leave your comments in the comment section, and we can talk about what's been going on in the politics sector. Okay.
He had stayed on as Prime Minister. And I also thought it was a dignified thing to do.
Nearly 6 months after the vote to leave the EU, David Cameron's resignation, Michael Gove's political assassination of Boris Johnson, and the anointment of Theresa May as Prime Minister. Brexit look now.
Prime Minister.
I think what the
Theresa
government
May.
doesn't seem to realise is the basic asymmetry of this relationship. There are 27 of them, and one of us. They have a single market in which they take huge pride and want to protect at all costs, quite rightly, because economically it's so important for Europe. They don't want to exclude us from it. I mean, they see that we've decided to leave the European Union, but if we want to negotiate our way back, we can do that, but we can't sort of have it all on our own terms. We can't have our cake and eat it.
When you're a member of a club, you have some rights and you have obligations, and you can't just keep the rights and not the obligations. I had a text message from my son who said, I won't say the first text message. He said, Mother, you've just taken us out of the EU, removed the Prime Minister, and you're about to take trillions of the stock market. It would be useful to know what you're doing tomorrow. You're not jubilant about things like that because these aren't decisions which carry risks with them. But I was absolutely clear in my mind that it was the right thing to have done.
I've been working for this for 26 years. I couldn't have been happier, and I couldn't be more optimistic now. I think it's probably fair to say that in the country at large there was some sense of shell shock. Shall I tell you what that was? It's the shock of finding yourself back in control again. It's the shock of a convalescent who, bedridden for weeks, finally gets out of bed, crosses the floor, throws the door open and strides out into the garden, and there is a little moment of shock. But my goodness, it's a good shock.
What Brexit will ultimately look like remains to be seen. But what is clear is that the dramatic events of 2016 have changed the course of British history.
Where did the No, it's not rubbish. Queen Elizabeth speaks only this.
Order! Questions to the Prime Minister. Mr. Alan Brown.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know that the whole House would like to join me in sending our deepest condolences to the families of those who were killed in the horrific attack at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh on Saturday. The UK stands shoulder to shoulder with our Jewish friends across the world. Mr. Speaker, this is the last Prime Minister's questions before Armistice Day. This year is particularly poignant as it marks 100 years since the end of the First World War. It is right that we remember all those who have served and continue to serve, those who have been injured and those who have given their lives in the service of this country. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Alan Brown. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, I concur with the condolences about the horrific massacre and those who have served in the armed forces. Mr. Speaker, my Italian-born constituent, Laura Nani, she's resided here since 1984, attended school here, has had 2 children, and she's got a British mother. And yet the DWP have just decided she does not have a right to reside. This is part of the cause she cannot prove of five years of continuous work, a situation many EU nationals, including my wife, will find themselves in when they form apply for settled status. So what message does she have for Laura, for my wife, and other EU nationals that face rejection from this heartless UK government?
Say to the honourable gentleman that EU nationals do not face rejection by this government. We have been very clear about our commitment to protect the rights of EU nationals who are living here in the United Kingdom when we leave the European Union.
Mr. Mark Harper. Mr. Speaker, can I welcome what my right honourable friend said about Armistice Day? That will be welcomed by the 1st Battalion, the Rifles, who are based in my constituency. The Prime Minister will know that the tax burden is approaching a 50-year high, and that you don't make families help them with the cost of living by raising their taxes. So I'm really pleased we kept our promise to cut taxes for 32 million people. As the economy grows, can I ask my right honourable friend to make sure that we both continue to cut taxes and spend money on our priorities in the balanced way that works for everyone in our country?
I thank my right honourable friend and say to him, of course, he's absolutely right. The budget did cut taxes for 32 million people, and the rise in the personal allowance will leave a basic rate taxpayer over £1,200 better off next year than in 2010. But in helping people with the cost of living, it's not just those income tax cuts. The rise in the national living wage next year will give a full-time worker an extra £2,750 in annual pay since its introduction. And of course, by freezing fuel duty, we've saved the average driver £1,000 compared to pre-2010 plans. And we will continue to help people with the cost of living with our balanced approach to the economy.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join with the Prime Minister in sending our sympathies and our solidarity to the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. The attack was disgusting, depraved and appalling, and I'm sure every single member of this House would completely and unreservedly condemn it for what it is. I will also be joining the Prime Minister to commemorate Armistice Day and remember all those that lost their lives in the First World War and indeed all the other wars since. Mr. Speaker, if I were a prison governor, a local authority chief executive or a head teacher, I would struggle to find much to celebrate in the budget. I would be preparing for more difficult years ahead. Does the Prime Minister think that analysis is wrong?
I say to the right honourable gentleman, well, actually, if you look at what we set out in the budget, we set out more money for schools, we set out more money for prisons, we set out more money for prisons. What we have set out in the budget is that austerity is indeed ending. And what does that mean? Ending austerity is about continuing to bring debt down and put more into our public services, and we'll set out our further details in the spending review. But ending Ending austerity isn't just about putting more into public services. It's about putting more money into people's pockets, as my right honourable friend has just made clear. What we're doing in this budget is giving the NHS the biggest cash boost in its history. The right honourable gentleman used to ask me, what taxes will go up to fund the rise in funding for the NHS? The answer on Monday, it's fully funded without putting up taxes.
Just for the record, the words that I quoted were from...
Anyway, hold you there a minute. Just been thinking of this one. Have you noticed every time they have their little debates, their little meetings here, right? They talk about the elderly, they talk about public services. Do not talk about the armed forces. People that come out the armed forces. As soon as you come out the armed forces because of ill health, they don't give those people any support when they move back or come back into civilian life. Right? They need to do it. They need to actually support. They need to support people who left the armed forces and come back into civilian life. Right? They also need to support a lot more than they do. In fact, what do they do? Right? For the disabled community, what do they do? Apart from giving them one minute, they're giving us money, the support, they're giving us benefits that we need, the money that we need to live on because we can't work with our health issues. But then as soon as they give it in one hand, give us the money, but with the other hand, they take that away. So you give us one lump sum in one money, right? With one benefit, but then with another benefit, they claw it back off us. So what's the point of giving us it in this money and then take it back off here? There's no point at all. All right. So what is our British government going to do to support the disabled community? We need this disabled community, and I'm not just talking about the learning disabilities. I'm talking about the physical disabilities as well, right? Because the disabled community as a whole don't get help. We don't really get help. We don't get that support that we need, right? We've got the NHS, it's making government cutbacks. We've got the social services making their little cutbacks, right? Taking money away from us, giving us a service, then taking that service away from us and saying we don't need it. Then we do. We need the service. We need that money, right? Because of our health issues, right? We need that, right? And we've got social services taking money off us. We've got the benefit people, right, taking money off us. We've got the government taking money off us, right? It's like they're stealing. It's like they're stealing. It's like they're stealing candy from a baby, right? You wouldn't do that, right? You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't take an ice cream away from a child. You wouldn't take candy. You wouldn't take sweets away from a child. So why are you taking the money, the form of income that disabled community so rightly needs? I mean, we don't get much at all. We only get what we right? When you get like a little bit, right? And it's not on. It's not on, right? They'd rather give it to people who don't need that money. They take it away from the people who needs it, right? And then they give it to people that don't need it. People who are old enough and ugly enough to get off the fat lazy backsides and go out and get a job. You know what I mean? So I think that this government needs to look after the disabled community, the elderly community, community, the single parents in the community, right? And make people who is old enough and ugly enough to get off the fat lazy backside and get a job, right? That's what I think. Oh, I can't read that, Mr. Gareth. Sorry. All right. Just please drop your comments in the section there. And whoever gives you a like on your comment, all right, it'd be brilliant. I also would probably agree with it if I can read it. I can't read that well. All right. But hey, ladies and gents, ladies and gents, let's go over again and play this video and get some more ideas on what the government is about to say.
The Institute of Fiscal Studies. Non-protected departments face a real terms cut of 4.1 billion. The Prime Minister promised austerity was over. The reality is it was a broken promise budget, and she knows it. With violent crime rising, police numbers slashed and conviction rates down, why did the government fail to find a single penny for neighbourhood policing in the budget?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, first of all, we did put extra money into CT policing in the budget. That was on top of the £460 million.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please do me a big favour and share this broadcast. Let's share this broadcast and get other people's views on the broadcast.
That has been made extra, that's been made available for policing in this year. That is in sharp contrast to what Labour was saying at the 2015 election when they said the police should take 10% cuts in their budget.
Jeremy Corbyn! Mr. Speaker, this is just another example of the contempt.
Please give me your views. Please give us views. Your views.
The Police Federation. No wonder the Police Federation.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, please share this broadcast. Make it go viral. Make it go viral. Give us your comments. Give us your shares. Give us your views.
And police chiefs are taking the government to court over their pay. Mr. Speaker, with school funding cut by 8% per pupil, does the Prime Minister and her Chancellor think that little extras are enough for austerity in our schools?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, what we actually see happening, as I said earlier, is more money announced in the budget for schools. That's on top of the 1.4 billion, on top of the 1.4 billion pounds extra that's already been announced for schools this year, and there'll be a further 1.2 billion going into schools next year. And actually he's wrong, because overall per pupil funding is being protected in real terms by this government. What do we see in the budget? We're ending austerity, we're bringing debt down, we're putting more money into our public services. We're taking the country forward. What would he do? His policy would mean borrowing more, taxing more and wasting more and taking us back to square one.
Many schools, including mine, have had to resort to asking students and their parents for funds. Not me, Sasha, a parent worried about the future of her school, because this broken promise budget means that head teachers will still be writing begging letters to parents. And can the Prime Minister explain why she chose not to end the benefit freeze for 10 million households, but instead brought forward a tax cut for higher earners?
Can I say, actually, as the right honourable gentleman knows, we have put extra money into universal credit in the budget. What we see importantly is universal credit being a welfare reform that ensures that people are encouraged to get into the workplace, and when they are there, they are earned. But I'm interested that the right honourable gentleman chose to raise the question of tax cuts. On Monday, he said that cutting taxes for 32 million people was frittering money away on ideological tax cuts. Yesterday, the Shadow Chancellor said Labour would support the tax cuts. Monday, the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, talked about tax cuts for the rich. Yesterday, his Shadow Chancellor said what we've always known, that the tax cuts were for middle earners, head teachers and people like that. So when the Right Honourable Gentleman stands up, perhaps he can tell the House whether he will back the tax cuts and vote for the budget.
Why?
Are you done here? Mr.
I'll not
Speaker.
go on there. Right,
Mr.
and,
Speaker, the order. It doesn't matter. I've got all the time in the world. It will take as long as it takes. The Right Honourable Gentleman will address a House that has the manners to listen, and the same goes when the Prime Minister is speaking. There will be a decent display of respect, and we will go on for as long as necessary as the public would expect to ensure that that's the way we operate. That is all there is to it. Jeremy Corbyn. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The benefit freeze takes 1.5. If you wait a moment, I'll explain what I might. Order, Mr. Hans, calm yourself, young man. You're getting a little overexcited. I know you've already asked the question. You blurted it out to the best of your ability, and we're most indebted to you. But now is the time to keep quiet. Jeremy Corbyn. Mr. Speaker, the benefit freeze takes 1.5 billion from 10 million low and middle income households. A low-income couple with children will be £200 worse off. For them, there is no end to austerity. Labour would have ended the benefit freeze. And as she well knows, Labour policy is to raise taxes for the top 5% and for the biggest corporations in the country. That would be a fair way of dealing with financial issues facing this country. And can the Prime Minister confirm, will she kindly confirm, there is still another 5 billion of cuts to social security to come in this Parliament, if it lasts till 2022, hitting the incomes of those with the least. Will she confirm that? Yes or no?
Can I say to the Right Honourable Gentleman that, of course, what he fails to mention from the budget is that as a result of the changes we've made on universal credit, 2.4 million people will benefit by £630 a year. And when he talks about helping those who are on low incomes, yes, we're helping people who are on low incomes. We're saving people money by freezing fuel duty. That's been opposed by the Labour Party. We're letting people keep more of the money they earn by cutting income tax. That's been opposed by the Labour Party. The Right Honourable Gentleman keeps claiming that he's backing working people. But I say to him again, if he wants to put more money into people's pockets, if he wants to take care of working people, he should vote for the Conservative budget on Thursday.
I'm really not very clear whether that was a yes or a no, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister once claimed to be concerned about burning injustices. Well, that concern's fizzled out well, hasn't it? This was, Mr. Speaker, a broken promise budget. The Prime Minister pledged to end austerity at a party conference, and the Chancellor failed to deliver it in this House. The cuts continue. Those on lower incomes will be worse off as a result of this budget. Austerity has failed and needs to end now. Well, Mr. Speaker, it's very clear. Only Labour can be trusted to end austerity and end the cuts to those on lowest incomes and invest in our country again. So now we know councils, schools, police, prisons. Order. Members can shout as long and as loudly as they like. Order. And if they feel that they want to indulge themselves doing that, so be it. The Right Honourable Gentleman's question will be heard. Well, yes, when it comes, it will be heard in full. So don't waste your breath and damage your voices. Jeremy Corbyn. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure some of the members opposite won't have heard what I was saying at the end, so I'll repeat it for their benefit. So now we know councils, schools, police, prisons, public sector workers, and those reliant on social security will face years of austerity. Will she apologise for her broken promise that she was going to end austerity, because she has failed to do that?
First of all, the Right Honourable Gentleman talked about my commitment to tackling burning injustices. Yes. Oh, yes, they say from the front bench opposite. Indeed. Was it Labour that introduced the Modern Slavery Act? No, it was me. Was it Labour that made sure that people in mental health crisis were not being taken to police cells as a place of safety? No, it was me. Was it the Labour Party? Was it the Labour Party that introduced the race disparity audit? So for the first time we can see what's happening to people from across our communities in this country. No, it was me and this government. And I'll tell him what else this government has done. I'll tell him what else this government has done. By taking a balanced approach to the economy, careful financial management, what do we see? Borrowing down, unemployment down, income tax down. Oh, up, they say. Well, I'll tell them what's gone up. Support for...
Order! I said that the Right Honourable Gentleman must be heard. The reply from the Prime Minister must be heard. The Prime Minister.
The Labour benches want to know what's gone up. I'll tell them what's gone up. Support. As long as it takes, I'm going to tell you. Support for public services up. Growth up. Wages up. Debt is falling. Austerity is ending. Under the Conservatives, the hard work of the British people is paying off.
Robert Halfon!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Click Sargent, a wonderful cancer charity for children, has found that families in Harlow face a 54-mile round trip to get to their nearest treatment and are costing them up to £161.58 per month. Average families taking their children for cancer treatment are paying £180 per month. Given the huge £20 billion increase to the NHS budget, would my honourable friend meet with me and Click Sargent and introduce a young cancer travel fund to help these families with the cost of living?
Well, can I thank my right honourable friend for his question. He raises a very important issue, and obviously our thoughts are with those children and their families at what must be a really difficult time for both the children and their families, and we do continue to look at what we can do to help them. I believe that when he talks about children from his constituency going to the nearest specialist treatment centre, that is Great Ormond Street, which does wonderful work in this country for children. We do have a healthcare travel cost scheme that does allow patients to receive a reimbursement for their travel costs if they're in receipt of a qualifying benefit on a low income. But we absolutely recognise there's more to do, particularly for the cost of living for cancer patients, including children and young people, as my right honourable friend has raised. And I know that the relevant minister from the Department for Health and Social Security will be very pleased to meet with him and the charity to discuss this further.
Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the remarks from the Prime Minister regarding the Tree of Life massacre and, of course, on Armistice Day? Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister guarantee the supply of medicines to the NHS in the light of a no-deal Brexit?
Take to the right honourable gentleman. First of all, as he knows, we are working for a good deal for Brexit, and as he will also know that all departments, and indeed we have issued technical notices to businesses and others, are making contingency arrangements should a no deal occur.
Ian Blackford.
Well, of course, Mr. Speaker, that was no answer to the question. That can the Prime Minister guarantee the supply of medicines in the light of the no deal? Mr. Speaker, why did this government last week quietly begin a dramatically truncated tender process to try and stockpile medicines at a cost of tens of millions of pounds. Funds that should be spent on frontline health services. The Prime Minister has only been concerned about how Brexit might harm the Conservative Party. It is time that the Prime Minister woke up to the real harm her Brexit policies could cause the patients. Prime Minister, isn't it the truth that this government is in a blind panic, trying to cover up for a blind Brexit?
No. Can I just say to the right honourable gentleman, first of all, if he had been listening and paying attention over the last months, he would have known that actually in the budget last year, the Chancellor made clear that there was money available for no-deal planning. We stepped up the no-deal planning in the summer. Departments like the DHSC are ensuring that they're making the responsible contingency decisions that any government department would make. What we are doing is working for a good deal in Brexit, and we're working for a good deal that will benefit the whole of the United Kingdom, including Scotland.
Peter Bone! Mr. Speaker, I always thought the Chancellor was a bit iffy about Brexit, but how wrong I was, sir. This week he announced a Brexit dividend budget if we come out of the European Union with no deal. He will be able to cut tariffs, abolish VAT on certain products, and reallocate the £39 billion that he was going to give to the EU in this country, cutting taxes, improving public services, and lowering debt. Prime Minister, I always thought that you could be the Queen of Brexit, but did you ever think the Chancellor could be the King of Brexit?
Can I say to my honourable friend that I'm pleased to see the support my honourable friend shows for the Chancellor. What the Chancellor delivered this week was a budget that is good for people up and down this country, and we should all be celebrating that.
The Bears.
In 2014, I wrote to HMRC and the then Chancellor to ask how much tax was unpaid on letting income from private landlords. And they wrote back to me and said it was 500 million in their estimate, which is enough to build around 7,000 social homes. How much is that tax gap now?
Can I say to the honourable lady that in overall terms we have been closing the tax gap over the years, as I think my right honourable friend the Chancellor said in her budget on Monday. Since 2010, we've actually, through the work we've been doing to close the tax gap, to ensure that we deal with tax evasion and avoidance, we've collected £185 billion, or protected £185 billion of revenue for the government.
Steve Double.
Mr. Speaker, it's 47 years ago this week that the UK's last space launch took place through the Black Arrow project. Many of us feel that's too long. With the confirmation of a vertical spaceport in Scotland is very welcome. The real prize is to be first to market with horizontal launch capability. As the Prime Minister will know, Spaceport Cornwall is well placed to deliver this prize. But will the Prime Minister confirm that the government remains ambitious to be a first mover on horizontal launch, and will she back Spaceport Cornwall's bid?
Can I say to my honourable friend that he's raised a very important issue, and he is, as I would expect, championing the cause of Cornwall in this, as one or two other of our honourable friends from Cornwall are also supporting him in that. We have awarded grants worth £31.5 million to enable satellites to be launched from UK soil, and we've also announced a £2 million fund, subject to business case, to help boost airports' ambitions to offer what he suggests the horizontal space flight, and that includes sites such as Newquay, Glasgow, Prestwick and Snowdonia. The UK spaceflight programme is continuing to consider these leading proposals, and I'm sure would have heard my honourable friends championing of the routes for Cornwall.
Lillian Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend, the member for Bassetlaw, has told me about the harrowing evidence he witnessed during 3 weeks of hearings by the Independent Inquiry into into child sexual abuse, investigating Nottinghamshire councils, and I've also read some of the survivors' courageous testimonies. I hope that when the inquiry panel publish their recommendations next summer, the Prime Minister will accept them in full. But the survivors need help now. A suggestion that's come forward is that a small amount of money for the survivors' groups would have a disproportionate impact, providing support and encouraging others to come forward. Will she ensure that resources are made available to provide that help now?
Can I say to the Honourable Lady, she's raised a very important issue, and I'm pleased that I was able to set up the inquiry into child sexual abuse. As I said at the time when I did it, I think people will be shocked to know the extent to which children were being abused in this country in many different environments and circumstances. She's raised a particular issue in relation to Nottinghamshire. And of course, when the report of the independent inquiry comes forward, we will look at their recommendations very seriously. I will ask the relevant minister to look at the issue that she's raised about the survivors groups. We did work, I did when I was at the Home Office, work with survivors groups. It was talking to them and hearing from them that made me realise exactly how terribly badly people have been treated, the appalling crimes that have been committed and the appalling abuse that they had suffered. And that's why it's important that this independent inquiry gets to the truth.
Mr. Andrew Mitchell. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following the welcome call overnight from the American administration for the ending of the Saudi bombing campaign in Yemen, will my right honourable friend use Britain's undoubted authority at the United Nations to press for a new Security Council resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire and meaningful and inclusive negotiations to end what is the worst and most terrifying humanitarian catastrophe on the planet?
And I thank my right honourable friend, who I know has been consistent in pressing on the needs of the people of Yemen. And we certainly ban back the US's call for de-escalation in Yemen. He references our role in the United Nations Security Council. In fact, in March, we proposed and coordinated a UN Security Council presidential statement, which called on the parties to agree steps towards a ceasefire. This remains our position. But as my right honourable friend, the Minister, said in the House, I believe, yesterday, a nationwide ceasefire will only have an effect on the ground if it is underpinned by a political deal between the conflict parties. And my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, discussed this matter with Martin Griffiths, the UN Special Envoy, last night. They agreed that the UK will continue to encourage all parties to agree to de-escalation and to that lasting political deal which will ensure that any ceasefire will hold in the long term.
Matheson.
Thank you. Young women are dying because if they're aged under 25, then they can't get a cervical smear test, even if they have the symptoms relevant, and even if their GP wants one. So will the Prime Minister take the easiest decision she will be asked to make this year and abolish this arbitrary age limit, and in doing so save women's lives?
I say to the honourable gentleman that I recognise the issue that he's raised. It's one that has been raised before. Of course, on issues like this, it is important that we take clinical guidance on it. But of course, issues about the future of the NHS and how it operates are matters that the NHS are themselves considering as part of their long-term plan for the future.
Fiona Bruce.
Would the Prime Minister welcome the acquittal this morning by Pakistan's Supreme Court of Asia Bibi, the young Christian wife and mother of 5 who has spent over 8 years in prison, mostly in solitary confinement, facing the death penalty on blasphemy charges merely for drinking water from a communal supply? And will the Prime Minister in particular commend the courage and integrity of Chief Justice Saqib Nizam for the message he has sent out regarding religious freedom for those of all faiths and none in delivering this judgment, setting Asia free and rectifying a great injustice?
Thank my honourable friend. And the news out of Pakistan of the release of Asia Bibi, I think, will be very welcome to her family and to all of those who have campaigned in Pakistan and indeed around the world for her release. Our long-standing position on the death penalty is well known. We call for its abolition globally.
Chris Ruane. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, since 2010, the number of rough sleepers has risen from 1,700 to 4,700. We now have homeless tent encampments outside on Victoria Street. Homeless charities believe that one of the main reasons for the huge increase is the botched introduction of universal credit and a general hostile environment towards the poor. Can I ask the Prime Minister why she believes the number of rough sleepers has shot up by 268% on her watch?
I say to the honourable gentleman, we recognise that we need to take action in relation to rough sleepers. We have a commitment to halve rough sleeping by 2022, to end rough sleeping by 2027. That's why we have already published a strategy to deal with this. We have put initial funding of £100 million into this, and there are pilot projects being worked in various parts of the country in relation to this issue. And I hope he will, if he is interested in this issue of rough sleeping, I hope he will support the proposals that the government has put forward that were confirmed in the budget for increasing stamp duty on those who are purchasing properties in the UK who don't live or work in the UK. That money to go into supporting people who are rough sleeping.
Tom Tugendhat! Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will my right honourable friend join me when she goes to the Cenotaph next Sunday in paying tribute not only to our own war dead from this country, but to those 3 million who came from the Commonwealth to serve in the cause of freedom? I will sadly not be in Tunbridge this weekend. I will be laying a wreath in Delhi, paying my own tribute, and I know on behalf of this whole House, paying tribute to those who suffered and died. Will she join me also in wearing a khadi poppy at some point? The reason for which is the homespun cotton that remembers Gandhi's and India's contribution to the effort is a vital reminder to all of us here of our links around the world, but particularly to India.
Can I thank my honourable friend for highlighting this vital contribution that was made by soldiers from around the Commonwealth, and he has highlighted particularly those from India. And I also pay tribute to my honourable friend for his own military service. We must never forget that over 74,000 soldiers came from undivided India and lost their lives. 11 of them won the Victoria Cross for their outstanding bravery, and he will know they played a crucial role in the war across multiple continents. I'd like to also congratulate the Royal British Legion and Lord Guardian for their efforts in recognising this contribution with the special khadi poppy, honouring the sacrifice of everyone who served a century ago. And I will certainly be interested in wearing a khadi poppy at some stage over the period as we lead up to Armistice Day, just as I'm pleased to be wearing a ceramic poppy today. The honourable lady from the front bench opposite says she is wearing one of them. I'm very pleased to see that. And I would also like to say I'm very pleased to wear the ceramic poppy today that I see that a number of honourable members are wearing, which were created by children at a school in the northwest. And St Vincent's, indeed. And it is very important, I think, at this centenary that we all recognise and that younger generations understand the immense sacrifice that was made for their freedom.
Mr. Speaker, what does the Prime Minister say to a local primary school who have written to me in desperation as they are struggling to cover their basic pay? The budget offered just a tenth of the money already cut and can only be spent on the little extras. The Chancellor said that schools struggling to keep teachers, save subjects or maintain hours could now buy a new whiteboard or a laptop. But what use is a whiteboard if there's no teacher to use it?
I say to the honourable lady, as I said earlier, in response to the Leader of the Opposition, we are putting we were already putting £1.4 billion extra into schools this year. We're putting an extra £1.2 billion into schools next year, and the £400 million announced in the budget comes on top of that £1.4 billion this year. And crucially, overall, her pupil funding is being protected in real terms.
Mark Francois. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, you quite rightly referenced the centenary of the First World War. Wouldn't that be a very fitting time to end another period of justice?
namely the legal scapegoating of brave army veterans by others for political or financial gain. Last week, 104 of your Conservative colleagues, with members opposite over 50 members of the other place, including 4 previous chiefs of the defence staff, wrote to you and asked you to join with us in defending those who defended us. I know there are only 104 of us, but nevertheless, are you with us?
Can I say to my honourable friend, I recognise the passion with which he has championed the interests of our brave soldiers, and we owe so much to them across so many different areas and so many different fronts for their heroism, for their bravery, for everything that they have done to maintain our freedom. He has, of course, raised particularly in the past, and now this issue that was raised in Northern Ireland questions as well, about the question of the legacy concerns that there are in relation to what happened during the Troubles and cases being taken against actually not just soldiers but police officers who also bravely defended freedom in Northern Ireland and acted against the terrorists. We are committed to making sure that all outstanding deaths in Northern Ireland should be investigated in a way that is fair, that is balanced and that is proportionate. The current mechanisms are not proportionate. There's a disproportionate focus on former members of the armed forces and the police. We want to see these deaths being investigated in ways that are fair, balanced and, as I say, proportionate.
Mr. Speaker, I have a constituent, Mr. Hassan Mirza, a UK citizen, who for the best part of the last decade has been unsuccessfully trying simply to renew his passport. For some of our fellow citizens, the system is clearly broken. So can I ask the Prime Minister if her office, not the Home Secretary or the Immigration Minister, but if her office will review this case and then come back to this House and tell us if waiting 10 years simply to renew a passport is even remotely acceptable?
Can I assure the honourable gentleman I'll make sure the case is properly looked into.
Extremely grateful. Dame Caroline Spelman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to associate myself with the fine words of the Prime Minister and others on the armistice, and may I invite her to warmly welcome the choir of the Bundestag and its President, who will join our own Parliament choir this evening in a commemorative concert in Westminster Hall to mark this historic occasion.
I think the Right Honourable Lady was going to offer us a little sample of what is in store. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very happy to join my right honourable friend in welcoming the choir of the Bundestag and the German Vice President to this concert that is taking place this evening, a very fitting way to recognise what the centenary of the armistice. As my right honourable friend may also know, the German President will be laying a wreath at the cenotaph this year. What armistice gives us is an opportunity to come together to remember the immense sacrifices made in war, but also to join with our German friends to mark reconciliation and the peace that exists between our two nations today. The concert this evening is part of that, as will the German President's presence at the cenotaph be.
Albert Owen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister rightly chooses North West Wales to spend her holidays, and her mountain walks inspires her to make decisions such as the 2017 general election. Amongst the delights of North Wales is the food and farming sector, and in particular the Menai Strait seafood, which relies on direct and fast exports to the European Union, which is now free of barriers and free of tariffs. Can the Prime Minister assure the House that that sector, automotive and aviation, can enjoy after the March the same free movement underpinned by a comprehensive customs union?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that he's named a number of sectors. We have heard from those sectors their concern about frictionless trade. The proposal we have put forward to the European Union that would provide for that frictionless trade as part of a free trade area.
Amber Rudd.
Hi, Becca.
Mr. Speaker, BD Foods in Hastings is a successful food manufacturer and supplies hotels and restaurants.
Hello, Rebecca.
They recently made a very good breakfast sauce, Mr. Speaker, called the Full English Brexit, which I think will be appreciated by many of my colleagues, although it's a little hot for me. Chief Executive John Davis has been in touch with me. He would like to invest £2.5 million, securing jobs and further investment in the business, but he is concerned about continued access to the single market as we leave the European Union, either through the single market or the common rule book. Could I ask the Prime Minister to bear in mind, as she concludes those negotiations, the importance of protecting investment and jobs all over the country?
Can I say to my right honourable friend that I think our honourable friend, the member for Wellingborough, might well like the hot English Brexit sauce that is to put on his breakfast sausages. But can I also reassure my right honourable friend that the plan that we
Yeah, I'm okay, thank you, Rebecca. Yourself? You okay?
Because what we want to see is that business-friendly customs model with the freedom to strike new trade deals around the world, but also a good trade deal with the European Union, with a free trade area, that common rule book for industrial goods and agricultural products. That will be good for jobs, and we're working towards that good deal.
Amy Crosby! Up to £20 billion sits in pension funds unclaimed by pensioners. That's why the pensions dashboard, which helps people make sense of their pensions, is such a good idea. So why is the government backtracking on delivering the dashboard?
That's good, Rebecca. Yeah, that's really good. Can I ask everyone please to share the broadcast, keep active in the chat, and please give me your views on the British politics and how you think the country should be run.
To take control of helping pensioners retrieve what is rightly theirs.
Well, it is. I agree with the honourable gentleman. It is important that people understand their pensions and understand what they are entitled to, and that's why the DWP is working with the pensions industry on this issue. And we aren't just working with them; we've actually put some money forward as part of this project to ensure that that information is there and is available to people.
Dr. Julian Lewis. Will the Prime Minister give reassurance to those of us in this House and in the country who voted to leave the European Union that under no circumstances
Good, mate. Good.
agree to any alteration in the exit date of the 29th of March next year?
I'm happy to give that reassurance.
I'll be back in a minute. I'm just going to the toilet, okay? But I'll be back with you soon. Just going to the toilet.
Many EU nationals live in my constituency. Does the Prime Minister think it's fair that these valued citizens who've lived here for years and contribute to their community should have to pay for the right to stay?
As I say to the honourable gentleman, as I've said to others of his colleagues, we are protecting EU citizens' rights. We're protecting EU citizens' rights. That was one of the key issues that we put at the forefront of the discussions before the December joint report was agreed. But we're actually going further than that. I was pleased to be in Norway yesterday and to discuss with the EEA and EFTA countries the protection that we will give to EU citizens when we leave the European Union.
Victoria Prentice.
There are 50,000 amputees in Syria. Will the Prime Minister join me at the Singing for Syrians flagship concert in St Margaret's to hear parliamentarians from across this House sing like they can hear us and remind the people from Syria, the civilians, that we have not forgotten them?
Can I say to my honourable friend, I will look at my diary. I can't guarantee standing here that I'll be able to attend that concert, but can I commend her and all those parliamentarians who will be taking part in that concert for the work they are doing in Singing for Syria is a great movement. It's a great thing that actually reminds people, not just raises money, but reminds people of the importance of remembering those civilians in Syria who, as she says, we want to ensure that they know they have not been forgotten.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The only way Smulders and North Tyneside can continue to bid successfully for foundation jacket contracts is if the National Grid cables over the Tyne are moved. Will the Prime Minister commit her good officers to work with National Grid and have the cables removed by 2020 so that Smulders and other major North Tyneside and wider Tyneside manufacturers can win contracts and secure North-East jobs for many years to come?
Can I say to the honourable lady that I would be pleased to make sure that a relevant minister in Bays looks at the issue that she has raised.
Mrs. Gillian Keegan.
Yes. During a recent
recent meeting with primary school heads in Chichester, I was shocked to discover that every single one of them had been subject to violent attacks by pupils or parents. As the government launches its NHS violence reduction strategy today, will my right honourable friend consider what else we can do to protect our teachers in the valuable work that they do?
Yes, I'm certainly happy to look at the issue that my honourable friend has raised. And I think there is, she refers to what I assume as physical violence or attacks that teachers have been under. I myself have also seen cases where teachers have come under considerable, I would say, harassment and bullying on social media as well. And so I think this is an issue that we do need to look at.
Mr. Speaker, the Black Cultural Archives based in Lambeth, I'm a patron of it, is the only national heritage centre dedicated to preserving and celebrating the histories of black people in this country. However, unlike other national institutions like the National Gallery or the British Museum, which get over 40% of their funding from central government, the BCA currently receives none and is at threat of closure. She talked about the race disparity audit. Can I ask the Prime Minister to explain the differential treatment of the BCA, and in this Windrush year of all years, to right this wrong and provide it with the funding it desperately needs?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, first of all, that there is, I think, a difference of approach that is taken between those museums considered to be national museums and those that have developed in other circumstances. I recognise what the honourable gentleman is saying about the importance of this particular organisation and this particular, the relevance of what it is commemorating and what it is reflecting. And I will ask a DCMS minister to look at the issue that he has raised.
Andrew Jones.
High streets are the centres of our communities, and they have a social as well as an economic function. But the internet has changed everything. So I welcome the levelling of the playing field announced in the budget this week with the cut in business rates and the Future High Streets Fund. But will local businesses in Harrogate and Knaresborough be able to work with the local council to decide how that money is spent?
Can I say to my honourable friend, thank you for highlighting the help that we are providing to the High Street through our Future High Streets Fund. As he says, this will enable local areas to develop and fund plans to make their high streets and town centres fit for the future. And we'll be supporting local leadership with a High Streets Task Force, giving high streets and town centres expert advice on how to adapt and thrive, and it will be possible for local businesses to work with their local authorities to develop the plans that will indeed ensure that we continue to have plans for the high street that are fit for our towns and cities.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister inadvertently misled the House in response to my honourable friend from Bradford South over police pensions. This week it's emerged that the National Police Chief Council have taken the unprecedented step to threaten legal action against this government over its £165 million raid on pensions. Isn't it the case that under her leadership, this government has destroyed relations with the police so considerably that they have risked public safety?
No, the honourable lady is wrong in her portrayal of what has happened. First of all, I did say that this issue of pensions was one that had been known for a number of years, and indeed it has been known about for a number of years. We are committed to public service pensions that are fair to the public workers, but also fair to the taxpayer. And it's important that the costs of these public service pensions, public sector pensions, are understood and fully recognised by government. Now, the budget has made clear that there is £4.5 billion available to support...
Hang on. Again, they're talking about pensions, right? They're talking about pensions. Pensions are for people who are of old age, people who have retired. So they're talking about the elderly, right? And they can continue talking about the elderly. And so, yes, so rightly so, because the elderly has done their time. They've done their time in work. They've done their right. They've done their time in work. They've lived their life. They need to they need to now get a fun life in before that sad day comes. So I actually get all willing. I'm thinking it's all good that they got that the pensions right set in place. I actually do. I actually really think it to be good for the elderly to have their pension, right? So yeah, I agree there. right? I actually do agree. But I don't agree is when you come out of the EU, well, not like EU, when you come out of the Air Force, not Air Force, the armed services, right? When you come out of the armed services, if it's the Air Force, the Army, the Royal Navy, whatever, you come out the armed forces, right? Not every person that's been in that in the armed forces gets looked after. They get pushed aside, like a piece of trash. Like they're not needed no more. They're not wanted no more. They've got nothing to offer us. When really, they've actually earned their time. They earned their time. They earned the respect that they should be getting, but they haven't got it. Right? So, I think what they should do is when they come out of the armed forces and for no fault of their own, and they cannot work because of their health issues, their injuries, all right, they should be allowed to get hold of the benefits that suits their needs, all right, and get hold of their army pensions as soon as they need it, because at the end of the day, come into the army, come out of the army, come out of the armed forces, all right, with ill health. Because let's face it, people who've been in the armed forces, they've seen horrific things. They've seen so horrific things, it's so disgusting things. While they've been serving for their queen and their country, right? So they need the respect. They need that respect, right? But they're not getting that respect. A lot of our armed forces, ex-armed forces, right? Members, I came out the armed forces because they can't cope to carry on because of their health issues, because of their injuries, and the government. That's it. The government and the benefit people are just pushed to them aside, they're not needed. Like they're not needed. They're not worth knowing. They're not worth anything. That is wrong. That is so wrong. All right. And these people are these guys, these men and women that came out, been forced to leave the armed forces because of their health issues, their health conditions, right, for no fault of their own, have been forced to sell their homes, to lose their wives, lose their kids, to lose their homes, live on the streets, on the British public streets, right? That is diabolical. That is sick. That is revolting, right? They need to have the respect. They need to have that respect, right? I don't get much money, but if I see someone from the armed forces, I'll do my best to help them. Like if I see them, I'll get them something to eat, something to drink. I'd even sit down and talk to them, right? If they smoke, I want them a cigarette while I'm talking to them, and because at the end of the day, that's me doing my bit to respect them and to respect what they've done, not what I've been through, right? But I can't do everything, right? I can't do everything. Like the British public, they can't do everything, right? It leads down. It's actually down to the British government to do something about it. It's down to the social services to do something about it. But what? They won't. They won't. Because they only want one thing. They want the money in their little public purse, public wallet, right? The public bank, right? Oh, well and good. We're good at getting out of frigging a session. Well done, right? But the British government needs to take care of their British-born citizen before taking care of anybody else, right? That comes to this country because they can't stay in their own country. Look after your own people first. People come out of the British government needs to take care of the people that's left the armed forces because of ill health or and injury, right? Health/injury. They need to look after, the British government needs to look after the disabled community, not just the learning side of the disabled community, but the physical side of the disabled community. I have learning disabilities, right? I have hydrocephalus, so it's a brain disorder, right? I live in supported housing, and guess what? Right? Yes, I get benefits from the government, but you know what? It's not enough. Because of what? The why they give it to people who don't need it. They're giving the government are giving us a certain amount of money with one benefit, and then with another benefit they're taking it away. So what's the point of giving us this money here, and then in this with this benefit, then with this benefit taking that lump sum away from us again? There's no fucking point. There's no point at all. You know what I mean? Right? So I think that if I didn't have my learning disability, I would love to be a prime minister. I would gladly run for prime minister, and I would look after my British-born citizen a lot more than Theresa May. A lot more than Theresa May. Theresa May, she's not doing her best, right? She's being pushed around left, right, and fucking centre. She's pushed around, right? And she's trying to be another. Margaret Thatcher. That's what it is. I can't stand Margaret Thatcher. I can't stand Margaret Thatcher because she screwed this country over big time, right? Tony Blair screwed this country over big time, right? So far, this country has been screwed over by the British government, right? It's about time that the British government put the British members of the public first, right? I think every country that's in the EU to leave the EU, get that power back with them, the power of their borders back with them. Every country should leave the EU. Every country in the EU should leave it. Get the power back for your borders. Choose who comes into your country and who doesn't. That's what I would say. That's what I would do. Right? The EU is a waste of time and a waste of money. I've said it before. I'm saying it again and again. I will say it and say it and say it until one day the EU is no more, because the EU is disgusting. The EU is crap. The EU is diabolical. Right? It's not good at all. It's a waste of time, a waste of money. Right? So what I'm going to do now, go back here.
Public services next year in managing increased pensions costs.
You know, ladies and gents, I'll be back with you very soon. Right? I'm going to go have a fag quickly. Right? And while you listen to Theresa May.
My right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, is working closely with the police to understand the impact of the pension changes and ensure we make the right funding decisions to support frontline services.
Finally, Mr. Philip Davis. Speaker, can the Prime Minister tell the House why she and her government believe it's right that government spending is to be increased at a faster rate on overseas aid than for hard-pressed schools, policing and fire services in the UK? And whilst this House might be typically out of touch with public opinion on this issue, will she accept that the vast majority of the British people think that that warped priority is crazy crackers?
Can I say to my honourable friend, I continue to believe that it's right that the United Kingdom maintains its commitment to spend 0.7% of GNI on our international development. I would say to my honourable friend that I would suggest that he looks at the speech that in South Africa, when I was in South Africa in August. I gave a speech which explained how we want to ensure that international development aid is not just helping the most vulnerable people across the world, but also is helping countries to ensure that they can provide the economies, the good governments, the jobs that will take them out of needing that international development and that international aid in the future. I think it is right that we continue with our commitment to the poorest people across the world and to helping countries to ensure that they have a long-term sustainable future.
Thank you. Nothing unites India like cricket. It doesn't matter what language you speak, doesn't matter what state you're from. When it's match day, we all cheer together like Team India. Now it's 5-day test matches, 1-day internationals, and now T20 cricket. The sport has always adapted itself to its audience's taste and, of course, shortened attention spans. But the one thing that is true is that cricket has a rich history, and we know everything about it. Or do we? Did you know the first match was played between the US and Canada back in 1844 in New York? Then the sport started losing a bit of its steam. It fizzled out. Cricket isn't easily defeated. As South Asian and West Indian immigrants came to the shores of the United States, they brought with them their culture, their cuisine, and of course, cricket. So we went across the length of the breadth of the country and we found 6.
Right. Hello. Back again from having my cigarette. I'm now going to listen to this. I've seen this on YouTube and on Facebook. Sorry, it's a good video. I think it's better than a play.
Desire to find a way to fight the fire, but it's burning bright throughout the night, and the feeling dire. In the wake of loss of life, it feels insensitive to talk political, but when the evidence points to negligence, the situation is critical. In the nation's wealthiest borough, there exists another half, a half of lookers-on, of workers strong, no strangers to the graft. These folks are fueled by hope, the working broke. This inequality's not new. And though they're the neighbours of the wealthiest, their only luxury is the view. Last year, that building had 10 million spent on through and through refurbishment. Well, surely that's good news. Was it made safer to inhabit, more convenient to use, right? Because what's the price of human life? What amount could they not fetch? Working fire alarms, a sprinkler system, what the budget couldn't stretch. According to the BAFSA, for approximately 300k, they could have had a sprinkler system fitted. But for £10 million, they did the rounds, and who was benefiting? An aesthetic authority is a pathetic priority, while the majority continue in abject poverty, while burned by the baseless brunt of austerity and punished for their lack of financial prosperity. All that cash, and here is the mad thing. They found the funds for brand new cladding, encased in a case of flammable wrapping. New padding, the luxury flats they keep adding. Nothing changes. We've all seen Titanic. We know when disaster strikes and folks feel panic, put the shutters down because some must drown, put first class in boats, leave the rest to man it. Another tale of safety forgot, so the decking can look all neat. But have we learned nothing? Have we not come far? Why must we still feel the heat? There's a neglect of time, a neglect of care, a neglect of funds, a neglect of fare, neglecting here and neglecting there. Governance for the few, and I don't think that's fair. I'm glad the PM met with firefighters, but why can't she meet locals or comfort survivors? A public inquiry is not the right thing to do. They will brush it under the carpet just to see it goes through. We must demand a criminal inquest by hell or high water and call this what it is, corporate manslaughter.
So what do you think there, ladies and gents? What do you think? What do you think the government should do for their people? What do you think every country that's in the EU should do for their country? All right? Tell me in the comment section and tell me what you think that your government should do for their people. All right? I need to know. We all need to know what you think, your views on what their country should do. Their countries, their own countries. Everyone that sees this video, this broadcast, what do you think your country should do for their own people. Right? I'll turn this around again. Right? I am not being. I'm not saying anything I shouldn't be saying. Right? I'm just saying what everybody else is thinking. Right? And I think that we should be used as a country. I think we all should be looking out for each other, helping each other. I think every British person should be looking out for each other. You know what I mean? We should all look out for each other. The British look out for each other. The French look out for each other. The Polish look out for each other. Every country in and out of the EU, right, should pull together and look after each other, right, and get on with other countries, right? Because if we all come back as our own country, as have the power back of our own borders, right, and run our country the same way, all right, and respect each other's views, respect each other's rules and regulations for each and every country, right? Who needs the EU? No one. The EU is just rubbish. The EU is a waste of time and a waste of money, right? Another thing is, right, I said this before and I'm saying it again, right? What is the government? What is the government in these countries, right, doing for their disabled members of the public? They're not doing nothing really. They're giving us 1 minute. They're giving us a lump sum, right, in one benefit, and then they're taking that lump sum away with another benefit, right? Which is diabolical. It's wrong, right? Just like they're saying that the learning disabilities and the physical disabilities, right? As soon as you've got a disability, it's like we're not worth anything. It's wrong, right? Yeah, I voted out the EU. I voted out, right? I voted out for one reason and one reason only, because I think every country that's inside the EU should be out of the EU. Leave the EU well alone, because the EU is just a waste of time, a waste of money, if you know what I mean. So if every country that's inside the EU comes out of the EU, and I mean comes out of the EU, it'd be a lot better. It'd be a lot better. Because the reason I'm saying it'd be a lot better is because we have our control of our borders, and we can choose who comes in and who doesn't. Because look, America does it. Americans does this, right? America, Australia, and a lot of other countries does this, right? If someone from another country comes into our country, want to go into, say, if one of us, right, or somebody else from another country wants to go move to North Australia, they have to have a trade what Australia wants, right, and be willing to work in that trade, and they need to have that money there. All right, that person, that individual wants to move to Australia or to America, needs to have the money there to financially support themselves for so many years before they can get American citizenship or an Australian citizenship, which I think that is a good way of doing it, making the person that's moved to their country to support themselves. And I think the people who come to England, right, to people who come to Britain, right, should be made, people who come to Britain from other countries to be made to work in the trade that we need so rightly need, so rightly want, and so rightly need. All right, that's what I think anyway. What do you guys think? Please let me know. Please let me know. Right. With that in mind, I think I'll say farewell for now, and until the next broadcast, I want to say to you all, no matter where you are, I'm actually an honest person. I don't lie. I say how it is. All right. So wherever you are, if you're in Britain, if you're in America, if you're in China, wherever country you're in, I hope you I hope you have a good time, good night, good weekend, good night, good week, good weekend, good month. All right. And I hope until the next broadcast, I hope they all stay well and help each other. Right? Help each other, support each other. And next time you see someone who is made homeless, no matter what country you're from, right? If you see someone who is homeless, right? Don't just walk on by. Stop and think, that could be me. That could be one of my family members. That could be one of my friends. That could be my best friend. Right? That could be my child. That could be my mum. That could be my dad. Right? That could be my sister. That could be my brother. That could be my cousin. Right? And help that person. Right? You don't have to give him money. You can help him by giving him giving them a bite to eat. Like you can go in and get him a portion of chips or fish and chips and a hot or cold drink. Sit down and talk to them. Because let's face it, the homeless are people too. The homeless has a right. The homeless people have rights. Homeless people have feelings. Right? Sit down and talk to them and find out the reason why that they've been forced to sleep on the street. Right? And until the next broadcast, take care of one another, take care of yourself, take care of one another and each other. And when you see someone that needs your support, your help, no matter what that help or support is, step forward and give that person that help and that support. Let's show the world, let's show the government that we don't need EU, right, to help us show support to other countries, other members of the public. Let's show that we can do this without the EU. Because the EU is just a waste of money, waste of time. Right? So until the next broadcast, farewell, my friends, and speak to you later. Right? Bye bye. Bye bye.